Welcome to today's free webinar on the government job market. This program is being sponsored by Careers Advance. I am Lisa Panarello, founder and CEO of Careers Advance, and your host. I'm going to facilitate a panel discussion on the what, why, where, and how to drive a job search in the government and public sector. So let's kick things off with a few statistics around the government job market. There are 19 million folks employed by the local, city, and state government. There's another 2 million civilian workers permanently employed with the federal government. Together, that makes up nearly 25% of our nation's workforce. And the federal government nearly fills 90,000 jobs each year, and that is not counting the military or the postal service. There are roles spread across 100+ agencies across the nation, and that represent more than 650 occupations. The government and public sector is absolutely worthy of our attention, especially today when there's so much going on in the corporate sector. Now, that said, there's a difference between navigating the private sector and the public sector, and that's why we're here today. So let's meet our panelist, Christine Dyckman. Christine is an in-house trainer and employment counselor with the Monmouth County Division of Workforce Development. She creates and delivers more than 160 workshops each year, reaching 1,000 clients. And at the same time, Christine runs a private consulting practice where she advises local businesses and organizational development on HR analytics, talent acquisition, and recruiting procedures, including the 1099 contractor handbook. So we will certainly benefit from her deep insights and personal touch today. Tim Sackett, the president of HRU Tech. It's a leading IT and engineering contract staffing firm. Tim is a senior certified professional with SHRM. For those of you not familiar with that, that's the Society of Human Resource Managers. And is the author of a SHRM best-selling book, The Talent Fix. Additionally, Tim is a chief storyteller for Fistful of Talent HR blog and the co-organizer of Michigan Recruiters Conference. Recognized as a top 10 global HR influencer, we are sure to gain great knowledge from Tim today. Next up, Catherine Troutman is a federal career coach and founder and president of The Résumé Place, Inc. It's a human resources consulting and training firm specializing in the federal marketplace. In 2002, Catherine created the first ever certified federal job search trainer program for career counselors. And she's the pioneering designer of the federal resume based on her first guidebook, which is now in its 7th edition. Catherine is a highly sought after writer and trainer by government agencies around the world, and we're grateful to have her with us today. And last, but certainly not least, Peter Brigham. He's the director of business development at Kelly Government Solutions, a federally focused program management office located in the heart of the Washington, D.C. metro area. For the past 12 years, Peter has been capturing the federal sector business worldwide. Prior, he was the COO of Landmark Technology, a certified service, disabled, veteran, and women-owned government contractor. And he was the president of Tech Team Government Solutions. So well-versed in national security, military, and defense contracting, we're sure to learn interesting perspectives on outsourcing from Peter. Let's get this show started with our first question. Why pursue the government? What is it about the government that's going to give us some benefits? I mean, the quarantine has made many folks rethink their next career move, whether by necessity or desire for change. And the corporate world is typically our go-to option. So Christine, I'd like to start with you. What are the benefits of working for the government sector?
I think that many people know or are aware of the benefits for the government sector, including very good healthcare benefits, as well as usually a pension, 401k, things that maybe somebody is looking for down the road. There's a lot of perks. So even if you get a corporate job with healthcare, you're getting a little bit better healthcare and a higher tier healthcare that's covered under federal guidelines. So when you start looking for a government job, those things tend to be covered and only 10% of the numbers that you just spoke about are in that Washington, D.C. area. All the other agencies are spread out across the United States. So when we think of government, it's not just DC, it's everywhere. So it's definitely something to consider. We need the government in order to run day-to-day business, period. So it's definitely not going anywhere. As we're corporate, you never really know what's happening day to day, hour to hour. So it's more stable.
Stable. That's a word I think many folks are looking for because it's really not, there is no such thing as job security, but
No,
having a little bit more stable workplace, excuse me, may be certainly attractive reason to pursue the government sector. Thanks.
absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that. So, Peter, can you now expand on this topic? What are some of the key differences between the city, state, and federal employment? Perhaps, in employment structure or work environment?
So my area of expertise is the federal side, and I can speak to that. I don't have much experience on the city or their state, but on the federal side, when people think of it, they think of being a federal employee. That's not the only marketplace. There's really two differentiators within the federal market. There's the federal employee and there's the federal contractor. The federal contractor is an individual, or excuse me, is a corporation that's won a contract to provide services to the federal government. And they outsource a lot of their programs because it's cost effective for them, and it actually, they find it to be cheaper, and they have the ability to move faster on bringing people on board. But I have experience in the, as a federal employee. I served 12 years. And what I would like to say there's stability, long-term, and often a lot of people think that they're serving their country, which they are. The other thing, it's a structured pay scale, so you have really growth that is you can really evaluate. On the contractor side, people join that because it's a little bit quicker. The government side can take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to join. If there's a clearance involved or some type of background checks, it can even take longer. On the contractor side, they tend to move faster, and they also pay a little bit more. They pay better than on the federal employee side. So a lot of people join the contractor side because they can move around. But on the contractor side, the contracts are typically 5 years in length. There's a fear there that you might lose a job, but historically, when a new firm takes over an existing contract, many of the incumbent workforce move to that position. So I would say the advantage is working for the government. They do spend a lot of money. In 2020, there was about $600 billion that was spent on services, and out of that, it was everything. Where the growth areas were research and development, construction. They also did a lot in the professional services categories, which would be engineering, marketing, sciences, or they did quite a bit in office management. So those are the growth areas on the federal side. And again, I think the advantage to working for the federal government direct is long-term stability, serving your country, and as a contractor, it's better wages, better merit increases, and in some cases, better benefits.
And regarding that contractor structure, if you're hired as a contractor basis, is there a set duration and you have to continually re-up your status?
Not from an employee perspective, but what companies compete for opportunities, and it can be the typical contract is a 5-year period. So when you're out searching for opportunities, that's one question you do want to ask: how long do you have left on the contract? But as an incumbent, there is an executive order from the president that mandates that you give first right of refusal to the existing workforce. So that's important to note. So a lot of the existing workforce transitions from company to company, but there is a lot more turnover or movement within the contractor side of the business because they're always looking for increase in salary, new opportunities, or potential advancement in other ways.
Great. Well, good to know. We have a question that popped up, and I want to address them when they're appropriate, before the Q&A at the end. So, Christine, maybe you can tackle this one. Susan wanted to know a little bit about, is there an age factor in the recruitment on the city and state side, because that's where you're in, the county side, in terms of people over age 50, over age 60, is that a consideration? Is there a stopping point for the age?
I think in the corporate side, there definitely is. There is ageism in the market, and people can agree or disagree, but it's there. In government, it is there, but it's not so much because you're paid for the job. You're not paid for your years of experience. So if the position pays $30,000 and you're willing to take $30,000, then they're evaluating you and your skills based on this is what you're bringing to the job. And you could be a new grad, or you could be 15 years experience, or you could be, age 65. But if you're willing to take that salary level, then they're going to take all of that into consideration. And I think that's where Catherine comes in, because how you write your resume and the words that you're using fitting with the job description are a huge telling sign.
Sure, we'll definitely get to that. Great. Thanks so much. Okay, so let's take this to the next step. Let's look at the what and the where. You mentioned before, Peter and either Christine, when you hear government, you often think politics, White House. But there are a plethora of other jobs to consider. We mentioned the statistics, like there's over 650 types of occupations. So, Catherine, can you share with us which roles, as the expert resume writer here, what roles are you seeing in demand right now? What are some of the job types that folks can start to open their ears and eyes to when they're doing their search?
Well, just this week, I found an amazing job on USA Jobs just by luck. I was looking up emergency management specialist with FEMA for somebody in Colorado. And I found an announcement that I had never seen before. It said right up at the top that we are closing this announcement when we receive 5,000 applications. Wow. I never saw that before. Usually they say we're going to close at 100, 200, or 300. So I called up the HR person because I thought it might be a typo. It should have been 500. I got her on the phone. I said, I'm just curious, is this a typo? Are you really think you're going to get 5,000 and going to close it? She says, yeah, it's not a typo. We're hiring a lot of people. And this announcement is for a broad recruitment for all of the FEMA districts, US-wide. And we're hiring a lot of people. And they closed it at the closing date. They did not get 5,000. But still, they thought they would get 5,000. So the point I'm making is that FEMA is hiring. Look at FEMA.
Good look at FEMA. And are there other sort of, because I know the airline industry certainly is, a lot of the corporate world is getting hit and the low on the hiring end. So in addition to, say, FEMA and emergency management, other areas, whether it be education?
Well, I think the American Airlines people could look at the FEMA job, because I read the qualifications for it, and a lot of the flight attendants and the people that work in airlines could actually qualify for that job. So maybe I should write a blog about that. But there's a lot of jobs on USA Jobs. SBA is hiring a lot of people because of the CARES Act. They're giving out all this money to everybody. Anybody who's got experience in loans and credit and retail banking should look at SBA right now. You could go to USA Jobs, and they got all the COVID jobs separated out into separate sections. There's 497 pages of COVID-19 jobs. And don't be afraid, because it says these are temporary jobs. These are open for 1 year or 2 years. Just do it. Just apply for the job, and they're probably going to extend a year or two. And even if they do eventually close it down, you'll have tenure by then. You might have even scooted over from accepted to permanent. Who knows what? Just go for it, and don't read that. Just do it. Apply. Everybody needs jobs right now, and don't look at that temporary 1 year, 2 year thing. Go for it. Look at the COVID-19 jobs. That would be interesting. All kinds of jobs. Everything you can dream of. Accounting, public health, oh my gosh, FDA and CDC, but you have to have specialized experience. Right. And if you've got medical background or a medical clinical, you have to translate it into public health, because it's not the same. So government's hiring. You just need to go to USA Jobs and start looking.
And this
Was
is
that
where a
US,
thesaurus,
USAjobs.gov, is that right?
Yeah, usajobs.gov, yeah.
and this is where a thesaurus comes in handy for everyone. Just
yeah.
take your experience and translate it to the words that are in the job descriptions, and you are the perfect match. It's just a matter of showing them.
Yeah.
Got it. Great. All right. So, Tim, let's bring you into the picture.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that are opening up, and where are other places that folks can look for these jobs?
You know, really what we see is that the difference between the federal, county, state job market is no different than the private sector. I just had conversations with the CFO for the state of Michigan, and they're begging for accountants, right? CIO, they're begging for, you know, cybersecurity and IT folks, psychiatrists, physicians, dentists, pharmacists, like all of those hard to fill private enterprise positions are even more harder to fill in the government side because the government isn't competitive with the private sector in the wage standpoint. Now, again, I think, you know, what we heard earlier from Christine is you have the balance, right? So you might not get as much pay going public as you were private, but there's probably some more stability in the public sector. But the reality is that everybody is, you know, hungry for all the skilled level positions right now. The other piece that we see too is we have private employers and public employers begging for anybody willing to take a job between like 18 and 22 an hour because of the unemployment CARES Act stuff. Like so many people are just collecting unemployment and not going back into the workforce. And I have employers, you know, constantly on the public side as well, just saying we just can't get people to apply to these jobs. And that becomes tragic for a number of levels. Now, again, as we see the economy start to return and we see some of the unemployment stuff go away, you know, we definitely will start to see more people apply to those jobs. But, you know, again, in technical engineering, medical, data, accounting, all of those things are in heavy demand right now.
You know, actually, I just want to bring in a question that we have that kind of leaps off what you just shared, Tim. So Maeve asks, and excuse me if I mispronounce your name, she is considering going back to school for 1 or 2 years to learn a new business or technology skills. So are there any specialized positions outside of healthcare that the government is having a hard time filling that it kind of help her direct her educational planning?
Yeah, I mean, if you think, if you know, accounting in general, not even CPA accounting, but just accounting, it's a very older, you know, workforce that's there, and so many people are actually, you know, retiring, and it doesn't matter if you're public or private, they're begging for accountants. We're seeing students who are sophomores in college and accounting programs getting full offers for when they graduate, 2 years before they graduate. And again, is it an easy program to get through? No, but it's also not the hardest, right? You don't have to go and learn how to be a coder, or you don't have to learn how to do cybersecurity, or you don't have to go through the medical science side of it. It's math. It's not the most difficult thing. It might not be the most exciting career, but boy, it's stable and it pays really well.
Great.
I know one.
Excellent.
I know what.
Yeah.
I want to add to that.
Please.
Cyber.
Cyber.
I was going to say the same.
You can get in a 2-year program at a community college or cybersecurity, and that's enough skill to get you a cyber job. The government wants to hire more cyber people. So I would say that would be good if you could stand it. I mean, you never talk to a human in that job, but you know, it's a good job, a lot of data analysis and research, but steady, very steady, but just no people.
Great to know, though. So accounting and cybersecurity, great paths to start breaking into. So I appreciate the question from our audience. All right, so we're got a little bit understanding of the where and the what types of jobs. That's going to lead us to our actual job search. So you brought up the usajobs.gov, great site to go and find the jobs. Now let's think about just the job search itself. You know, the public sector has a lot of moving parts and requires careful attention. So Peter, I'm going to kick this to you first. Can you give us sort of an overview of what your knowledge of the government job search process and maybe any application mistakes we should avoid or tactics we should follow?
Well, I think everybody's leveraging social media today as a tool for recruitment. So as mentioned earlier, the 5,000 applicants that submit their resumes. That's not unheard of by any chance. There's a lot of that type of competition that's going on in the marketplace. So, some of the points to, or some of the mistakes to avoid would be really when you're applying for a job, do a little bit of research on the agency. Understand the environment, understand how you might fit into that environment, and then create your resume so it's relevant to what they're searching for or what services they're delivering. So that's extremely important. The other mistake that we see often is misspellings on resumes. I mean, it's unfortunate, but you'll be overlooked if it's there. The other one is the too lengthy or the resumes that really just don't have a flow or connect to it. So a lot of the job search process today is done electronically. Resumes come in. There's actually applications that read it, filter it, and tell you, here's your top 25 applicants based on these 500, 700, or 1,000 different resumes that you've received. So at any point you make it past that where they've sourced you and they want to actually begin the discussion, that's a huge leg up. And that just kind of tells you you've begun the process. So it's extremely important there. What else can I tell you? Can you? So on the
Well, because if you go to a job search engine like usajobs.gov and you see an ad for a job, is it simply after you, and we'll get to Catherine's specialties on the resume piece, but after you submit it, are you filling out an application per se? Is there other elements part of that whole process before you get the call?
The process itself is pretty lengthy, and you need to have patience and you need to have time if you're looking for a job, either in the contractor community or within the federal space. So there's two avenues when you're going into the federal space. You get contacted, there's an interest, they tell you to start filling out the forms. You need to fill out those forms accurately and with detail. And you need to make a determination of whether you qualify or you don't qualify, because you don't want to waste your time in a lengthy process and come to the end and find out that you don't qualify or you didn't fill out the paperwork right or that kind of thing. So I would say that it's a very deliberate process, but you're talking 6 to 8 weeks. Now, there's two tracks you take. During the application process, if the recruiter contacts you, they may have you fill out a form, an SF-85 or an SF-86. The SF-85 is for unclassified type work. The 86 is for classified work. And if the classified portion of it becomes involved, it takes much more time. But the advantage of working in a classified environment is there's a limited labor pool and you have a lot more opportunity, both at the government side and the federal side. So you do have to fill out those applications, and you're going to go through a process. You're going to go through a multi-interview process, first with the recruiter, and it's the recruiter's job to prepare you for the opportunity and to give you all the information and build out the timeline. So there's important considerations that are going on there. But I think the big thing is you need to have time, you need to have patience, and you really need to have accuracy in your presentation. So those are the big things that are going to help you and avoid. The other thing is prepare yourself for the interview. Talk to your friends, maybe find out some of the interview questions they've had. Take a look at Glassdoor, for example. Sometimes they'll post interviews out there, interview type questions. Do research, and I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, we're going to get to that a little bit deeper to that question later on.
Okay.
But I did want to ask you just one thing that you mentioned about make sure that you're qualified. In the corporate world, I'm always advising my clients, peers, what have you, is, if you're 67% qualified, you go for it, because there's never a perfect fit, but there's other complementary skills, experience that you have. In the government application, do you need to fit and check every box 100%?
Not necessarily, but I think you need to show relevance of how you can deliver to that opportunity. So it's depending on the type of job and what you're going after. But I think in some cases, yes, in other cases, no. So it's kind of a hit and miss, unfortunately.
Okay.
Again, but it's understanding the agency, the relevance of your experience to what they're looking for, and communicating that so that you can attract their attention. It's extremely important.
Great. I got a couple of questions from the audience here. Let's see, either Christine or Tim. I'll throw it to either one of you. Christine, maybe. Rebecca's asking, are there tools to learn how to fill out the supplemental documents asked for in the government jobs? Like she's asking, over and above the resume and the cover letter, are there tools to learn how to fill out those other supplemental documents? So can you add some light to that, Christine?
I can't because that's not my specialty. I can guide on a federal resume and how to complete one. But just like my colleague said, you're all my twins, by the way, Peter and Tim. It's just a matter of following the formula, making sure that there are no spelling errors. You answered all the questions and they won't take blanks. And if you're not showing, if you're wasting their time, they don't have time to be wasted. I mean, for one example, 5,000 resumes for just one position. So they don't have time, and there's very, very few of them. If you are leaving it up for them to decide, they're going to decide garbage, and that's where you go in the circular file, as opposed to on the desk in the A pile or B pile. So look at your resume, look at your application from a recruiter side. Would you hire you? It's the same as in a corporate sense. You just have a lot more boxes to check for them.
So leave no blanks, even if it's not a 100%, leave no blanks. Well, I want to, since I've got you on screen here, I had a question yesterday that came in early from Eva, and she wanted to know, do all government agencies have the same master employment application? In other words, does federal agencies use all the same application? Do the city and state use the same application? Or are there all their differences?
They're all different.
Massive differences.
Yeah, I could tell you even county to county here in New Jersey, it's different because of home rule, kind of like a Board of Education. So you have different recruiters and different HR people that are reviewing resumes and applications, and what they want is different from a different county, which is different from a different county, and that goes to the state as well, which goes to the federal government as well. So everything I wish it was one size fits all, but it's not. Kind of like how you format a resume. What doesn't work for you, try it for 6 weeks. If you're not getting the feedback that you want, you need to try something different, because your results will be the same if you change nothing. You've got to change something to get different results.
Great.
It is a great idea. Go get some startup capital and make a common app for all government jobs. That would be an awesome technology.
Woohoo! I'm with you, Tim.
Someone's going to start and innovate. Great job. Tim, you were starting to chime in there. I want to ask you, there's a question because you were talking about accounting and then we brought up cyber. A question from Patrick. Is there any advice for attorneys looking for legal jobs in the large market areas from the government space?
Yeah, I mean, I think you go on sites like LinkedIn, or you just go to your normal like bar association within the state that you're in, find those attorneys who are working in those public jobs and reach out to them in network and ask them. More than likely, like we're all creatures of habit, and if I'm the lead counsel of a county government or a state government or whatever, I love to walk down to my HR talent acquisition department and hand them the resume of an attorney that I found on my own. And then they will walk you through the process of how to apply and what that might be. So don't ever give up on the networking side of how to find that job.
If you're looking in this area, I see a lot of requests from verbal as well as online compliance. If you know something about compliance, that is a big deal.
So one area I can mention is the Department of Justice has a Mega 5 contract, and that's facilitates a lot of their illegal activities across multiple divisions. They award out to multiple companies. So if you go on the internet, you type in Department of Justice Mega 5, look at the contractor community that's serving them. that might be a starting place for you. And some of the big guys on that are Deloitte, PAE, and then there's a bunch of smaller ones. Lockheed Martin was another one. So they're the primary contract holders. They're the great place to start if you're an attorney. And then there's a bunch of smaller organizations. But it's interesting because every government agency has attorneys that specialize in certain areas within their discipline. And so there's ample opportunity out there for attorneys.
Great.
Hope
And
that.
I'm glad I'm recording this because I got to go back and listen to all this myself. All right, so we've got some good information there, and we've touched on in terms of the application mistakes. And Peter, you hinted no spelling errors. As little as simple as that sound, it's really important. So let's go a little deeper. Catherine, you're a resident expert here on the subject. So what are the key differences between the corporate resume and a government-style resume that our job seekers really need to know? And what are some of maybe your top do's and don'ts to help them escape the resume black hole?
Well, for the government, there's not a black hole. You can find out your results. So that's good. I coached a young man this morning. He's applying for program analyst jobs, GS 11, 12, 13. And he was writing to me saying, I'm getting nowhere. And I said, well, how many jobs have you applied to? How many jobs have you been referred to? How many jobs are you best qualified? He wrote back to me, I applied to 47 jobs. I was referred to 8 jobs. I was not hired. It says not hired, 1 job. 4 jobs were canceled. All of that information is on USA Jobs in the application status page. So there's no black hole. If you want to find out what happened to your resume, you can do it with government. If you look at your system and you read your emails and get results for everything. And what we found was, here's the big mistake. I went on Zoom with him this morning. I went into his account and I looked at 2 of his applications, trying to figure out what he did wrong, because his resume, we wrote it, it was perfect. His problem was not the resume. And we found that there's a second part of the questionnaire. It's called the assessment questionnaire. He had been scoring himself down. He had not been rating himself at the highest level. And he had been just saying, I do this work independently. That's not the highest level. The highest level is I'm an expert, or I supervise people, or I train and assist other people because of my expertise. Well, he's a 26-year-old genius in data, performance management, analysis, research, compilation. I know he helps everybody he gets near with all their database problems. So that's why he's not getting referred more and he's not getting any interviews, is because the questionnaire score wasn't good enough. He needed to give himself more credit on that questionnaire. So that's a big mistake right there. And then going back to the resume, 2-page resume for private sector, and I recommend 5 pages for federal, because you need to add more details about your duties and responsibilities and add examples that prove your past performance. So the federal resume is double the size of private sector, and it needs to look correct. I wrote a book called the Federal Resume Guidebook that's got 17 resumes in it. And if you look at them, you'll see there's a difference. There's more sentences. We don't use bullets. We don't use one-liner bullets. We use little paragraphs with like the resume behind me. See that right there? See, there's no bullets there. Those are paragraphs. That's a new graduate resume right there. We have descriptions of courses and papers and projects in detail so that the HR person can see what they learned in their graduate or undergraduate work when we really hit experience or education. So that's a big difference. The length is really big. And don't send a 14-page resume. I looked at an IT specialist resume today, 14 pages, and he's applied to 139 jobs. I went in his account too. 14 pages is too long.
So 4 to 6 pages being the sweet spot, because you really have to sort of share every detail of your background, but 14, no one's going to dive in. So really what I'm summing up from your expertise here, Catherine, is make sure you speak the language and the level of that position. I have so many folks that come to me that really undersell themselves, and I have to help them say, listen, you've got to put yourself out there at the level that you are, because if you're not, no one's going to see you in that role. You don't have to say I'm the best, but you do have to position yourself at the weight and the level that the role is looking for. Otherwise, you will get cut out. So
So
it's great.
let me say one more thing then. Okay, so that every vacancy announcement on USA Jobs has a section called qualifications section, requirements and qualifications. And the section that says qualifications is usually about 5 sentences long, or maybe 7 sentences. It's really little. And it says your resume must show that you have 1 year experience at the next lower grade level in these areas. Please give examples. And then they'll list 1 to 5 things, only 5 or 3. If you do not match those 3 to 5 items in the qualifications paragraph, you do not get best qualified. Right there.
All right, so before I move on to the next question, I just want to answer Daryl's question. We have over 70 folks on this call from all over the country, all our participants today, and in various different sectors and roles. So we've got HR professionals, but we also have adults, job seekers, as well as, and folks in different industries. So just want to let you know, we've got a really mixed bag of nuts here on this call. So thanks for the question. Okay, so we've got some hints on what to do for the resume. It's so very important. Make sure you match what they're looking for. And to Peter's point, take your time in answering all those application questions fully. Well, all this, let's sort of keep on with this thread. If they're looking at your resume, do they look at your social media? In the private sector, they do. They check out your LinkedIn profiles. They look at maybe even Facebook and Twitter activity to get additional insight into the candidate, to go beyond the resume. Does the government? I've had no luck in my research here. So Christine, can you shed some light? Is our digital presence a factor in candidate evaluations?
Do you want to hear my answer?
I want to hear your answer. Give it to us straight.
Yes, it is. Think about you as a constituent of the county, the state, the federal. You want to know what's going on with the hurricane that's coming to your house. Where do you go? You go to email, you go to social media, you go to see who tweeted what, and they're a reliable source because they're government people. Well, guess what? Government finally got on board and they're starting to look at all of your social media as well. Are you a trustworthy candidate? Are you spewing stuff that's not correct or negative connotations about your previous employers or your current employers or your friends, but you're friends with the wrong people? Or all of that stuff actually does have an impact because they don't want to bring other people into their organization when they're trying to establish trustworthiness when you are not trustworthy. So as far as like being corporate or being government, just do the same thing. Keep it clean. Clean up your social media, use the most popular tools if you use them at all, and keep them locked down. All of the stuff that we would say to a corporate applicant, you're going for a government applicant as well.
There you go. Yeah, I don't think the government want to admit that. I couldn't find any information on that, but it is good to know. So clean up
They're starting to embrace the use of social media for that reason, because so many people are using social media, especially during COVID-19. That's the way we all stay connected. That's how we find out information. And you're seeing the use of Zoom. You're seeing the use of Facebook Live. You're seeing the use of all of these things that were never in place before. So that also has an impact on you as a job seeker. So keep it clean.
Right, clean with the digital dirt, they say.
Yes.
Tim, I wanted to ask you to expand on this and maybe bring in a question we have from Rebecca is,
Sure.
Does it count against you if you don't have a big social presence? And maybe you have to define what big means maybe in the government space. So can you kind of throw some ideas onto that?
Yeah, I think it can, especially if it's expected, right? Like if you're in a profession where you're expected to have some kind of a social presence out there, think about sites like LinkedIn or Glassdoor or places like that where, it's kind of normal for your profession to be, networking in a professional manner, and somebody goes out. Now, again, like Christine said, I've never heard of an HR federal HR person saying that they check social, even though we know they do, but also they might not have the time. But we see it with hiring managers constantly, right? When they get to that final 2 or 3 interviews, they're going to go out and they're going to check. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile. And I tell people all the time, like there's a magic number on LinkedIn. It's 500, like in terms of your network. If you're under 500, it will say, oh, this person has 373, kind of network people that they've, are first connections with. Some people will look at that and go, gosh, that's not a lot. So, but once you get over 500, it totally goes away. And so the magic number to get to is about 500. If you think about your professional network, your community, your schooling, all of that stuff, it's not really that difficult to get to 500. I think there's going to be a number of people that will look at stuff like that and say, what's going on? So, somebody that has a zero social footprint out in the interwebs is sometimes like a red flag. You're like, wait a minute, why isn't this person showing up anywhere? Not to say that it is a red flag. It's just people are going to question, is this person out there socially? If we can't see anything, then we make up our own minds. If we see something positive, maybe that makes us feel more positive about making that hire. Like Christine said, if there's negative, if there's dirt stuff out there, maybe that helps solidify our mind on that candidate as well. So I think potentially it could hurt you. Not necessarily. I think there's some things you can do to kind of just alleviate that by making sure you create a social footprint that you want people to see.
Yes.
Well said. And I'm thinking less Facebook, less screaming out what's on your mind per se, and more focus on LinkedIn because it is the professional presence out there that you can have. You're definitely searchable there. So be sure that your content is like the resume, matching the jobs and the roles that you're looking for. Which leads us really, since we've touched on LinkedIn, to the next question is, what about networking? So we know in the corporate sector, more than 70% of jobs are found through connections. So Catherine, let's start off with you. Is it appropriate to network in the government market? And are there some tangible benefits in actually doing so? Can you make some headway in your networking?
Sure can. If you know somebody who works in the government, you need to have lunch or coffee with them or talk to them on the phone and talk to them. Where do you work? And what is your job? And what is your agency? And what's going on there? Are they hiring or are they not hiring? And do you have any direct hire positions? And what's going on? What do you do? Are you kidding? You talk to everybody you know about federal jobs and you ask them what they do. Now, if it's a secret job, don't bother asking. They'll tell you zero. They won't tell you anything. But other jobs you do need to ask because the government's got a hiring authority called direct hire. And that means they can hire direct. It's called the direct hire authority. They've got a direct hire authority for people with disabilities and one for veterans with 30% or more disability, and for post-secondary students who graduated within the last 2 years, all kinds of direct hire authorities, military spouses who are married to active duty military. So yeah, you talk to everybody. Yeah, you do. Right.
Great. Yeah. Conversation starters, you can get your thoughts out there, and then it's how you learn. So good to know. I want to just answer a question, excuse me, from, and where's this? I know, Tim, you answered a little bit of Audrey's question there. So Audrey, you had asked on LinkedIn, excuse me, do you recommend accepting those that add you who went to your university, but you don't know them personally? You're fearing that, people you can't say, I know them as an employee. My quick tip here, and this isn't a LinkedIn webinar, but I'm going to have one, is network with purpose. So accept connections with purpose, reach out to folks with purpose. So if you're accepting someone that you don't know, but is in your university, then reach out to them and start developing a little conversation. So then you have a little bit of a stronger knowledge of who they are, and you can represent that relationship if you get asked about it. So just, do this all.
Totally agree, Lisa. I think that's wise counsel. I think if you network with purpose on LinkedIn, it's the best way to do it. Do it for your profession, do it for your school, do it for your marketplace. Someone randomly from 10,000 miles away sends you a LinkedIn request that you have no idea why, and it's nothing to do with your profession. I ignore those. I don't connect with those folks.
Right.
I think that you are on the money there, Lisa, and you have to think about it as there are, just read this morning, 705 million people worldwide on LinkedIn. And you don't know 705 million people, but you are the mama duck to your baby ducks in your network. And it's your job as a mama to protect your babies. So know who you're connecting to. And if you don't know them, reach out, have a conversation, and you can unconnect to them if you so choose. That's not going to be held against you. It's just smart networking. But you're building relationships, and keep in mind, it's all about them. It's never about you and you needing a job. It is about you needing a job, but it's never about that. So you're never doing a hard sell or a hard ask. You're just establishing, who do you know? Asking questions, asking interest questions about them. Every one of them, even if they're not working, has a spouse or a cousin or a sibling that has a job. And that job might lead you to your next opportunity. But if you don't have the conversation, you don't ask, you will never know.
Great way to end that question. Really, just purposeful and get out there and make it strategic. So all these efforts, having the right resume, applying fully, answering the questions, looking for jobs that do fit your capabilities, and doing your purposeful networking, it's all going to lead to interviews. So I can't believe how fast this hour is going. So I want to get to this last two-parter question and then do more of our audience questions. So Peter, let's go to you. Can you describe sort of a typical government interview process? What should we expect in terms of either number of meetings or how the recruiters will communicate, or maybe what types of questions will be asked?
So I think the first point to make is what's the role of the recruiter? So a recruiter is measured by that person's activity, how many candidates it takes to actually fill a position. So in our world, it can be anywhere from 4 to 8. We have 4 to 8 potential interviews to fill one position, and that's what the norm is. That's what our expectation is. Anything above that, it's costing more money. Anything below it, the recruiter potentially needs more training. What's important from a recruiter perspective is once they engage you and they feel that you're qualified for the position, is they lead you through the process. They communicate with you the steps that will be taken. And it's important for you as an applicant to ask the questions, what are the steps? What's the timeline for this? And understand kind of the whole process and where it fits in. So the initial interview with the recruiter is going to be basically describing the position, seeing if you think it's a fit for you, trying to learn a few nuances on you, and then kind of evaluating you against the group. So I would say and when you talk to the recruiter, ask him how many other interviews you're going to go through. So I'm going to talk from a contractor, you're a contractor potential. And sometimes it can be, you have 2 or 3 internal and maybe 1 external with the site that you're actually going to work on. But you have to expect at minimum 2. Some, they're in such a hurry to fill programs, they just do a quick phone screen with the hiring manager, the ultimate hiring manager. So that might be 20 minutes. But the recruiter themselves put themselves in the position of, I'm the hiring manager. I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste your time. So that's the important part of the interview process. So the meetings will vary depending on the customer, the requirement. Staying in touch with the recruiter, ask them for a timeline, ask them how I should follow up with you. You need to ask those questions. And every recruiter operates a little differently. Some will operate via mobile, some will operate via chat, some will do emails, some will do phone. So, it varies depending. And then to build a competitive edge, again, be prepared, research it, understand, really highlight your what you think your competitive advantages and what you bring to the plate that maybe other candidates don't. So you really want to leverage that.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear about the whole communication piece, because we often feel as a candidate sort of left out and we're waiting to be hearing from, and we can only ask minimal questions, but you really can be human in all this and find out about the process and get them to open up, because that'll allow you both to really succeed in that whole long-term process. Because I know, like you said, 6 to 8 weeks. So, all right. So good to know from the interviewing part. So now, final question for our panel that I have. And then I want to get to as many questions as I can, the rest of the questions from our audience. So this goes to you, Tim, and certainly anyone else can chime in. In terms of being at the negotiation table, when you get there, you know, I've heard and we've talked about that they're very stringent sort of salary ranges based on the level and the grade. Do we have any negotiating power at the table, and what is on the table to negotiate? Tim?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you talk on the professional level side, I think it depends on how desperate the current, group is, the leader is in terms of getting those. It's a struggle when like, well, we already have 5 people in this role and they're all being paid the same. So pretty much you're going to be paid the same. There's really no way around that. But so often in a lot of these public roles, there's levels, right? So you applied for a level 1 position, but there's a 2, 3, and 4. The negotiation side of it could be that, hey, I might potentially be able to get this up to a level 2 or a level 3, depending on what you need. But it's limited. It's not like it is on the private side for sure. But I do think that, there's ways to be able to get in. Maybe it's, gaining some kind of flexibility and not money, right? What's valuable to you? Hey, I can work at home 2 days a week and work in the office 3 days a week or something like that. Again, much more doable the more professional the level is. Because they have a little bit more sway. They're not, begging for a job. The government's actually begging for them to come to work. So it's a little bit different. You have to understand your negotiation power there.
Right. In the corporate sector, there are other things on the table besides salary, such as performance development training, car allowance, travel expenses and things, even sign-on bonus and your annual bonus. Are any of those things a possibility, or can you open up that conversation?
You can open up the conversation. It is amazing how, certain individuals, again, depending on, what they're at. We've seen this with some of the accounting folks. We've seen this with some of the IT folks, that they're able to get, a sign-on bonus, or they're able to get, their supervisor to be saying, hey, we'll let you go to 2 professional conferences a year, and we'll make sure that's in part of your development or whatever that might be. So it's always, again, you can always have the conversation. The worst they can do is say no. Some people get really upset and they're like, well, wait a minute, would they pull the offer if I start negotiating? We rarely have ever seen that happen. And it would have to get pretty contentious for something like that to happen.
Yeah.
Got it.
I'd like to add something. I want to add something that's very important. The government has internship programs called Pathways for new graduates. You've graduated within the last 2 years of a certificate program, bachelor's or master's. And if they do offer you a position, they will call you or send you an email and offer you the position. I suggest that you write back to them and say, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm very interested. Can I let you know tomorrow? And then while you wait that day, you write them a cover letter. It's called the Superior Qualifications Letter. And you ask for, if you're a new graduate, if you need help with paying your student tuition back, you ask for repayment of your student tuition, your federal student loans, because they do have the authority. Some agencies will kick in $600 a month toward your federal student loans. If you do not ask at that moment, when they offer you the job, you cannot go back and ask for it. You have to ask before you accept the job, and they might give it to you. They may not give it to you. It can't hurt to ask for it. And that letter is called Superior Qualifications Letter. You can Google it and it will come up. It is law. Superior Qualifications Letter. This is where you can ask in writing based on your superior qualifications for student repayment or even a higher step. But that student loan information is just so invaluable.
Oh, wow. Great added feature there. So thanks for chiming in. We've got a few minutes left. So I've covered the main questions that I wanted to cover. We sort of peppered it throughout with audience questions. I want to use the last few minutes for the audience questions. And if we can do sort of a 30-second response for each, we can get in as many questions as we can. And I want to stick with you, Catherine, because you kind of mentioned the word cover letter. And we have Zachary that asks, postings on USA Jobs often says that a cover letter is optional. Is it really optional?
Oh yeah, it's optional. Don't do it.
Don't do it?
You don't need to do it. Nobody's going to read it. The manager might read it, The HR person who's scoring and deciding who's referred, HR people don't read it. The manager might get a copy of it if the HR people forward it to the manager, but the manager, if they get it, they might read it. But the cover letter, a lot of people make the mistake of putting a lot of really valuable things into the cover letter. Put everything that's valuable into the resume. If you want to write a cover letter, it truly is optional. Were you going to say the same thing, Christine, or not?
I was going to say the same thing, especially for a corporate side, but they have proven over and over again that many do not read a cover letter. And if they do read a cover letter, it's after the resume and after LinkedIn. So you want to make sure that everything is kind of on par. If you are applying for a job as a recruiter, please don't share or post anything about being a horticulturalist. It just says it doesn't match. It's not showing your personality and what you care about, and everything should be in line.
Great, got it. Okay, so we've got Barbara asking, can you hand someone a resume for the federal government? She says a friend at NHSTA said all have to go through the E process. Is that truly the only way in? So 30 seconds, can you give us an answer on that, Christine?
I would say that you have to listen to the person that is telling you what to do. However, you need to follow up with the question, okay, if you're not going to take it, who should I contact? How can I get this to the person that is in charge of hiring, in addition to applying on USA Jobs or wherever? You want to go through two avenues. So even if you think of corporate networking, same for government networking. Who's that contact person?
So remember, before I mentioned the direct hire authority at the job fairs or virtual job fairs, agencies will go. They do take resumes on the spot. I put them in a folder, but they might also ask you to submit on USA Jobs in the same breath. So you might have to do both and just do whatever they say.
Got it. All right, I'm going to do this one last question, and then we're going to close it up. And this is actually part two of Zachary. He said about the prior work qualifying. Do you all recommend saying that if you can justify that you have equivalent or similar experience, even if it means being a bit broader in how you're interpreting it? In other words, in the application, when it says, are you expert, or are you proficient, can you use an equivalent term and be able to explain that further on the interview versus shooting yourself in the foot and not saying, no, I don't have that expertise to the nth level?
Well, in the questionnaire section, they will ask if you have specific experience in this particular ABC database, which you've never heard of because you never worked there, but you have 5 years of experience on databases in 3 other agencies. And so that would be an apples to apples situation, yes.
Great. Well, listen, we have just reached our time. I can't believe how fast this went. We have so many people on the call. I hope you got a lot out of this. I really want to give a huge thank to our panelists for their time, their energy, their insights. And be sure that if you did not catch a question today, or one comes up tomorrow, that we didn't cover, I encourage you all to reach out. We talk about networking. Check all the panelists out on LinkedIn. Get to know them. Ask your questions to get more insights. This will be recorded. This is recorded, I told you, so I'll get that out to you next week. Any of you that's not on my distribution list, please email me. I'll add you so that you can get the recording and catch what you missed, or share it with a friend. And in that regard, thank you all for participating today and giving me your time and your energy. I hope everyone stays well. Feel free to, if you have any career advice, looking for career coaching, LinkedIn expertise, reach out to me. LinkedIn, email, phone, I'm here. When we work together, everyone's mission is possible. Thank you all. I'll see you soon.